Hey guys, it's Zerk's What If, and welcome back to part 3 of What If Yuji was like Goro. Since I'm almost done with the What If Yuji was like Yorichi, I will be starting the What If Yuji had all for one pretty soon. I say give it a few more parts, not even a few, like after part 8 I'll start working on it, start recording, and yeah. But yeah, let's get right into it. Continuing where we left off, Joko and Yuji would begin to rush at one another. Before the fight had even happened, Kenjaku had told Joko to go along with Hanami because he had a feeling that Yuji would drop by. Joko would wonder why he was even needed there just because Yuji would show up. With Kenjaku telling Joko that Yuji was a lot stronger than he thought he was. This is when we cut back to the fight. Immediately, Joko would go in for an attack, attempting to take Yuji's head off with one punch. However, Yuji would read it easily, ducking underneath his attack, hitting him with a manji kick. Joko would have been hit by the attack, being a little dazed, but catching himself immediately. Just then, he would take a step back. However, Yuji would rush in, but Joko was hoping that he would do that. He would then manifest two small volcanic openings on some trees, hoping it would catch Yuji off guard. But Yuji was faster than he expected. Before the small volcanoes could even erupt, Yuji was already in front of him again. Yuji would swing, cracking Joko in the chest. Joko would fly back a little, but Yuji would grab his arm, pulling him back in. He would then begin to dominate Joko in hand-to-hand, with Yuji finishing off his combo, kicking Joko in the head, sending him flying towards some trees. Joko would catch himself again, but realize he may have been underestimating Yuji a little bit. He was a lot stronger than he seemed. Joko would then tell himself that he would stop holding back now. He would then create a wave of ember insects to send towards Yuji. However, Yuji, noticing them, would simply use the trees to dodge them. Ducking and zipping through trees, he would reach Joko again. He would send another punch flying towards Joko. Just as it would be about to connect, Joko would narrowly move out the way. However, just as Joko moved, a small portion of his body would have been cut, with Joko being confused because he was sure he had dodged the attack. However, he didn't realize that Yuji was able to use Shrine. If Yuji could get close enough to Joko, he would be able to use Cleave. In doing so, it wouldn't matter how durable Joko was. So Joko would realize that he might need to play range with Yuji, seeing as he has more opportunity for ranged attacks. Joko would then change his objective from trying to take on Yuji head on to attempting to exhaust him in order to defeat him. He would simply play from range and hope that Yuji gets hit by some of his abilities. Joko would begin to run away, as Yuji would get angry and call Joko weak for running. But Yuji wasn't letting him go that easily. As both of them would be running through the forest area, Joko would simply be attempting to use his technique to make volcanoes appear and hit Yuji, while Yuji would simply be dodging everything, jumping atop trees, and ducking and dodging around any volcano heads that he sees. Joko would be about to send another wave of ember insects towards Yuji, but just as he would be about to, Yuji would be right in front of him. He would throw a left towards Joko, with Joko blocking it. But the second the strike would make contact with Jogo's arm, it would slice his arm to ribbons. Yuji would smile and continue his devastating combo, with each attack cutting Joko every time he got hit. Joko had a large amount of cursed energy, so he could use reverse curse technique to heal the damage. However, he wouldn't be able to keep it up. He knew he couldn't beat Yuji in hand-to-hand. It was pointless to try to engage hand-to-hand with him as well. He thought Kenjaku was lying when he said Yuji was really strong. However, with everything going on at this moment, Joko would understand exactly what Kenjaku was talking about. With Yuji still continuing his assault, he would kick Joko into the air, leaping after him, grabbing his leg, and slamming him back down to the ground. He would attempt to slam back down on Joko, but Joko would just dodge out of the way, sending more ember insects towards Yuji. However, since Yuji was falling from the air, he had no way to defend himself, and just as Yuji would hit the ground, the ember insects would explode. Since Yuji hadn't been hit this entire time, he didn't realize how strong Joko actually was, but that one attack did quite a good amount of damage to him, causing him to be blown back into some trees. Joko would immediately send more ember insects towards Yuji, while making more volcanic heads to get in his way, so he had no choice but to go through the ember insects. As the volcanic head would form under Yuji, he would get out of the way in time. However, again, the ember insects would be right in front of him, blowing up. He would try to reinforce his body with cursed energy as much as he could, taking the brunt of the attack. As the smoke would clear, Yuji would be there with his outfit burned and his arms somewhat seared, but Yuji would only begin to smile. No matter how bad the fight was with Yuji, whenever he had his back against the wall, It seemed that's when his growth started to spike, so he was only enjoying himself more. knowing that he would get stronger from this experience. As Joko would send even more ember insects towards Yuji, Yuji wouldn't even attempt to block them this time. He was going to rush straight through them. Without wasting a single second, before they even got the chance to explode, Yuji would have already been sprinting past them, straight towards Joko. Joko would have been shocked by the sudden burst of speed, confused on how the hell he got so fast in this short amount of time. Joko would try to back up again to gain some more space between him and Yuji, but Yuji was simply relentless. He would already be in front of Joko, readying another attack. He would strike him with the left, then a right, grabbing his head and kneeing him in the face. Joko would attempt to strike, but Yuji would simply dodge backwards, grabbing his arm and using cleave on it. Joko's arm would fall off, and Yuji would take a step forward again. With Yuji's fist already cocked back, he would throw the punch, crashing it into Joko's chest as sparks of black would fly. This punch would cause Joko to cough up blood. It was an absolutely devastating attack. It would cause Joko to be sent backwards, flying into a building. Joko would be thinking to himself that he needs to end this some way, somehow. He refuses to die to some brat like this, even though it was only one black flash. That one attack nearly killed him. He needed to change the momentum of the battle, and he was going to do just that. Just as Yuji would be catching up to Joko, Yuji would have caught up, but the second he got there, he would see a large gathering of ember insects as they'd immediately lock onto Yuji, with him attempting to use the building to get away from the explosion. As they would explode, everything would be left open. This is when Yuji would look up and see Joko in the air, and behind him would be a giant meteor. Joko had decided to not use his domain, seeing as he wasn't sure if Yuji was able to use one or not. But he wasn't going to take any risk. He was simply going to take Yuji out right here with something he couldn't dodge at all. Yuji, seeing this, would begin to run. He knew that if he got hit by that, it would be over. As Joko would send down the meteor, all the other students plus Hanami would see it and begin to run as well, as it would begin to crash towards the ground. Since Joko was primarily aiming for Yuji, all of the Jujutsu sorcerers would get out the way, with Yuji just barely making it, but still getting hit by the shockwave of the attack. He would get caught in it and be blasted into a building. Joko would land, hoping that he killed Yuji, or anybody else in that matter. However, just as he'd look around, he'd see Yuji coming out of some rubble. Yuji's top would have been torn off, and his body had a couple of burns on him. He would simply get up and stare at Joko, laughing, telling him that he failed to kill him, and that he was going to die for that. Both Yuji and Joko would be at their wits' end. Yuji had taken a lot of damage from the ember insects, plus Joko's maximum technique. Joko had also taken a fair amount of damage, being pummeled earlier in their fight, while also getting hit with a black flash that almost killed him. Whoever would make the defining move in this last bout would be the winner of this battle. Joko would try to create another wave of ember insects, however, he was just too weak to create the large amount that he had created last time. It would only be a couple, however, he would still send them straight towards Yuji, hoping it would be enough to kill him. Yuji would be burnt and beat up, but it wouldn't stop him from continuing to move forward. He would rush in at Joko, sprinting as fast as he could. Everything was hurting, but he continued to push on. As the ember insects would get close to Yuji, they would explode, with Joko thinking that that was it. That was the end of the battle. That's all he needed to do. However, from out of the dust, Yuji would continue rushing forward, seemingly with one thing on his mind. It didn't matter how much pain he was in. It didn't matter what he needed to do. He wanted to kill Joko. This battle would push him to new lengths, and he knew it would. He would continue pushing forward. Joko would be trying to throw everything at Yuji to stop him from going. Yuji would simply be dodging and taking most of the attacks, pushing head on until eventually he was right in front of Joko again. He would cock back his fist, sending a punch straight towards Joko's head. As the fist would connect, more sparks of black would come off, blowing Joko's head clean off, exercising the curse right then and there. Yuji would then take a deep breath and begin to use reverse curse technique. He wanted to put off using reverse curse technique the entire fight to push his body to new limits. Yuji loved fighting when he was on the edge, because it helped him evolve even faster. Yuji would then turn around and see that everyone else was staring at him. They had to just watch him take down a special great curse spirit. As Hanami would see this, they would begin to become angered. Joko had died, and there wasn't much they could do about it. Since all of them were only barely keeping up with her, and Yuji had just gotten done with his battle with Joko. She would then attempt to expand her domain. However, before she could do so, the barrier would then collapse. Everybody would look up and see Gojo. Gojo would look down on the area to see which area needed help the most. While he would be scanning the area, he would see Yuji there, questioning how someone like him got into the Jujutsu High barrier without being noticed at all. He would also notice the large crater left behind and the burn marks, noting to himself that the cursed period he had fought earlier may have been here as well. He would then scan Yuji with his 6 eyes, noticing that he ate Sukuna's fingers as well. He would then teleport down in front of Yuji. Yuji already knew, even if he was full power, he wouldn't be able to beat Gojo, but he would still get himself ready. But to his surprise, Gojo would simply ask him, what does he plan on doing? Yuji would look at Gojo with a confused face. He thought Gojo would have came down and killed him first, but to his surprise, he was only asking him a question. Yuji would begin to open his mouth. However, before he could form a sentence, Gojo would then interrupt him, telling him that he should just join Jujutsu High. Yuji would stare at Gojo, not knowing what to say. He wasn't sure if he would die if he declined Gojo's offer, but he didn't want to join Jujutsu High. Yuji would then tell Gojo that he doesn't want to join Jujutsu High. He wants to be free and to be able to do his own thing. There were only a couple times he got in the way of the sorcerers, and that was when he was young and naive. He didn't know any better, and he was just following the rules of someone else. Gojo would then tell Yuji that he would die if he stayed as he was now though. They would send special grades after him, seeing as he was Sukuna's vessel. That would mean that eventually down the line, he would have to face Gojo himself. And does he think that he could beat Gojo right now, or even in the future? Yuji would then sit there and think. He wasn't sure if he was ever going to be able to be on Gojo's level. However, he wasn't going to let anything that Gojo said get the best of him. Yuji would then tell Gojo, even if one day they have to face one another, Yuji will get strong enough and still his resolve to beat people even like him. In the beginning, he only wanted revenge on those who did him wrong, on those who killed his teacher, but now he simply wants to gain strength. The Jujutsu society that the sorcerers nowadays protect isn't worth protecting to him. He's going to dismantle it with his own hands, even if that means making enemies out of the entire Jujutsu society. Gojo would laugh and tell Yuji that he has some balls trying to make an enemy out of the entire Jujutsu society. He would then tell Yuji that he was supposed to kill him way back when, after he found out that Nanami had died and it was from him, he wanted to kill Yuji. However, he gave Yuji the benefit of the doubt. Yuji was only a kid back then. His mind was molded into what Geto wanted, and now you have your own free will and you're doing things of your own accord, and you haven't killed anybody yet. He would then tell Yuji to leave before the higher ups get here. However, the next time Yuji and them meet, they may be enemies, so he'd better get stronger. He would tell Yuji that he's not a bad kid, he just has a few screw looses. Yuji would laugh and then take his leave. With the rest of the Jujutsu High School students converging on Gojo, they would ask him what happened. He would play it off as if Yuji and the other cursed spirit had gotten away, but Megami would know that Gojo was lying. Yuji would find himself at his little hideout with Sukuna growing a mouth on Yuji's cheek. Sukuna would tell Yuji, is he satisfied with everything that's been happening right now? He had almost died in that last battle, and it was to a special grade curse that Sukuna could have taken down easily. Yuji was still incredibly weak to Sukuna. However, his growth and progress was the only thing keeping Sukuna around. Every time Yuji would be put into a battle and seemingly be put on death's door, he'd grow in unfathomable ways. Yuji would tell Sukuna that he wasn't satisfied. He wanted more. He just wasn't sure how to attain it. There has to be more than him than just getting stronger on the verge of death. Sukuna would then tell Yuji, little does he know, every time he eats one of his fingers, he gets significantly stronger. So he wonders if he could apply that to anything, and not just Sukuna's fingers. He would tell Yuji that any special grade object that he were to come across, he should consume it. Yuji would be confused as to why he would want him to consume other things except for his fingers. Sukuna would tell Yuji that it's simply interesting, and he believes that things in the future will progress faster if he does so. Yuji would say whatever gets him stronger, he doesn't care, as he would roll over and fall asleep. The next few weeks, Yuji would simply be getting stronger, learning to use Shrine more, as well as searching for cursed spirits and special grade cursed objects to consume. Yuji was willing to eat anything and everything to get stronger. As long as it gave him strength, he didn't care what happened to him. He knew that eventually that the Jujutsu Society would take notice of him and want him dead, so he would have to get stronger. Kenjaku somewhere in the background would be plotting on how he could get Yuji to consume some more fingers. Their mission to steal more special grade cursed objects from Jujutsu High was a success, so Kenjaku would plan on planting more fingers around so Yuji could get stronger. As long as Yuji wasn't on the Jujutsu sorcerer side, everything would go to plan. Just then, Kenjaku would have an idea. he would be putting all his marbles onto Yuji. He would put 3 death paintings and one of Sukuna's fingers together into one body, hoping that it would push Yuji to new heights. This was also a risk, because if Yuji were to die here, everything Kenjaku had planned would go down the drain, and he would either have to try again from start or try to come up with something different. But he was betting on Yuji to be able to beat this curse. Yuji was already going around searching for cursed spirits and cursed objects that he could consume, and just recently, he was overhearing about some weird looking thing that comes out at night. It's been killing people and sucking the blood from their body. Yuji would immediately follow as many leads as he can to get the jump on the cursed spirit before the Jujutsu sorcerers could. Eventually, all of his researching would have led him to a bridge underpass. Supposedly, this thing was supposed to come out at night from under the underpass, and it would kill people who would dare get close to it. As Yuji would walk closer to the underpass, Sukuna would then tell him he could feel the presence of one of his fingers nearby, so it had to be close. He would then tell Yuji that the cursed spirit was very strong, and he hopes that Yuji will be able to satisfy him this fight. Yuji would take a deep breath and continue walking into the underpass. Just as Yuji would be about to walk into the underpass, everything around him would change. He didn't realize it, but he had entered the cursed spirit's innate domain. Yuji would look around, hoping that he would find the cursed spirit fast, but everything in there was weird. It was like the walls around him were dripping with blood, seemingly made out of flesh. Yuji would keep his guard up, but he would continue walking down the long corridor. Just then, Yuji would reach an open room. Yuji would look around, and he would see bodies hanging from the wall and ceilings, with blood dripping off of them. Most of the bodies were seemingly drained completely of blood. They looked like empty husks. As Yuji would look in the far corner of the room, he would see a weird, grotesque looking creature. It would be a weird looking cursed spirit. He would have 4 arms and be incredibly tall, with armor on his body that looked like it was made of blood. As the creature would turn around, it would look at Yuji, and from this one look alone, Yuji could feel the immense amount of bloodlust coming off of the creature, the insane power that it had coming off of it. Yuji would almost feel overwhelmed. However, Yuji wasn't going to back down. He loved these kinds of fights. Any fight that pushed Yuji to his absolute limits, where Yuji would be able to go all out. He was excited, but also terrified. Yuji would call out to the curse and ask it what is it waiting for. The curse would then stand up. It would then let out a ghoulish scream. Yuji could feel this scream throughout his entire body. Yuji was beginning to shake. It was the first time in his life he had ever been this scared. Sukuna would laugh and tell Yuji to try not to die. Just then, the curse would then rush at Yuji. It would use both of its right arms to strike at Yuji. Yuji would block the attack, however, there would still be a ton of power behind it. It would send him flying into one of the flesh walls. Before Yuji would even have the chance to gather himself, the cursed spirit would have created 2 flying blood discs and sent them flying straight at Yuji. Yuji would just barely get out of the way in time, thinking that they had just crashed into the wall and he could rush at the curse again. But as he would be running forward, the blood disc would then return, slashing him in the back. As Yuji would get hit with the blood, he would feel an immense pain begin to spread throughout his body. Just then, the curse would point at Yuji, and a strange marking would fall upon Yuji's face, going all the way down to his arms. Sukuna would then tell Yuji that he's starting to decay. He has to take this curse out soon, or both of them will die. Yuji would kiss his teeth, not realizing the danger he had just got himself in. Yuji would steel himself, knowing that if he didn't kill this curse soon, he would die, even though the battle had just started. Yuji would attempt to rush in again, trying to get the jump on the curse. He was hoping he could throw the cursed spirit off with his speed. He would rush in and strike the curse, hitting it in its torso, but the curse wouldn't budge at all. It was as if Yuji had just hit steel plating. It was hard, extremely hard, as the cursed spirit would then throw a punch of his own, striking Yuji in the face and the chest, sending him flying. Yuji would slide across the floor, thinking what he could do. He knew he could incorporate cleave into his punches, so he would do that, but he would have to break past the hardening as well. Just then, he would remember his fight with Joko and most of the fights before that. He would need to land one of those in order to break open the cursed spirit, so he would tell himself he would do just that. However, he had no idea how to activate it at will. He wasn't even sure if he was able to activate it at will. All he knew is that he needed to land one, and if he didn't, he'd probably die, just based off the couple of exchanges that they've had alone. He was either Yuji lands the Black Flash and does significant damage to the curse, or Yuji would die. It was as simple as that. Yuji would begin to laugh. To his surprise, the cursed spirit would begin to laugh as well. Yuji would rush in again. He was faster than the cursed spirit, but he wasn't stronger. He would strike the cursed spirit in his chest again, as the curse would then send its lower arms towards Yuji, attempting to grab him. Yuji would jump over it and knee the cursed spirit in the head. He would then use cleave, attempting to slash at the armor to weaken it. However, it was barely budging into the cursed spirit's armor. The cursed spirit would then use its top right arm to swing down on Yuji. Yuji would block the attack, however, it would still do quite a bit of damage to him. He would land on his feet, but he would slam down into the ground. Yuji would then prioritize on dodging instead of attacking for right now. Since he knew he was faster, he knew he could get away with a lot more. So as the cursed spirit would begin to go on the offensive, Yuji would simply dodge and parry, trying not to take any attacks head on. Yuji would attempt to concentrate as hard as he can so he could land a black flash. The curse would swing its two right arms, and Yuji would duck underneath him, swinging behind the curse. Yuji would cock his fist back and throw a punch. It would strike the cursed spirit, but it wouldn't be a black flash. Yuji would smack his teeth and back up. Just as Yuji would back up, two blood orbs would form in front of the cursed spirit. He would use both of his arms to clap onto both of them. Just then, a mouth would form on the cursed spirit's armor, and with a dreadful and ghoulish voice, the curse would say, "Piercing blood." As the blood would shoot out from the curse's palms, they would both start flowing directly towards Yuji, but they would be a lot faster than he anticipated. He would duck underneath the top one, but the bottom one would strike him in the leg, causing him to fall over and fall backwards. The cursed spirit would capitalize off this moment, rushing back in at Yuji. It would go in for a strike, trying to strike down onto Yuji. Yuji would just barely get out of the way, rolling backwards and flipping up. With Yuji's leg injured, he wasn't sure he could outspeed the curse anymore. But that wasn't going to stop him. If it was just pain, he didn't care. He was going to go back in, and this time, he was going to land a black flash. The cursed spirit would begin to throw blood orbs randomly, as Yuji would begin to rush in. As Yuji would get near one of the blood orbs, it would then explode. Yuji would block the attack, but it still did a decent amount of damage to him. But again, that wouldn't stop him. He would continue rushing forward. He would be dodging and ducking underneath blood orbs, trying not to get caught in the explosion. As Yuji would get close, the curse would swing again. But again, Yuji would dodge the attack. He would grab the curse's torso and begin using cleave, using it as many times as he could to damage the shell of the curse. The cursed spirit would try to use a knee, but Yuji would dodge around it, slipping around him. Yuji would concentrate as hard as he could this time. He would throw the punch where he had been cleaving, striking the curse in its side. As this time, black sparks would begin to fly. The curse would let out a cry and be flung into one of the flesh walls. With this black flash, Yuji was now in the zone. He was going to keep this up for as long as he could. He would go in again, and as the curse would attempt to swing on him again, he would dodge, using cleave on the curse's body as much as he could, dodging every attack. The curse would attempt to swing upward, but Yuji would use the fist momentum to jump off of it. He would land on top of the ceiling, pushing himself back down with as much force as he could. He would throw a kick straight towards the curse's face, hitting the curse with yet another black flash. This would crack the face mask off of the cursed spirit, and Yuji would believe that he had the cursed spirit right where he wanted it. With its armor flown off, he would do nothing but strike at the curse's face. Even if he doesn't land a black flash, he would still be able to do damage, so he would do just that. Punch after punch, dodging every attack that he could. The curse would then scream at the top of its lungs. Just then, a bunch of blood orbs would fly into the sky, even blood from the ceiling, even the corpses that were strung up on the wall. The blood would begin to pour out from them. The curse would then use its bottom two hands to create hand signs, as all the blood in the air would begin to heat up rapidly. The curse would then point its top two hands at Yuji. As he would do so, the blood orbs in the air and the blood from the walls would all jet at Yuji. Yuji wasn't going to be able to dodge this, but if he got hit by this attack, this would be it. Everything would be over. He didn't come this far just to die or just to lose here. He still has so much that he needs to accomplish. Yuji would then punch into the ground, causing the flesh floor to blow up, as majority of the blood orbs would hit the flesh, with some of them still being able to strike Yuji. The cursed spirit would begin to laugh, thinking that it was finally able to kill Yuji. However, when the dust settled, Yuji would be sitting there, grinning ear to ear. He would then begin laughing, telling the curse that he had to do a lot better than that just to kill him. He would begin rushing forward again. Yuji would let off a scream as he was sprinting towards the curse, as the curse would scream back, sending an attack to meet Yuji. Both of them would strike each other in the face. However, Yuji would have landed another black flash. Curse would try to hurry up and swing again, but Yuji was already dodging. Yuji would strike again and the curse's back, landing another black flash. The curse would attempt to backhand Yuji, but Yuji would duck underneath it, getting back in front of him, landing another black flash, as majority of the curse's armor would be torn off from the consecutive black flashes that Yuji had landed. It still wasn't going down. But just as it would attempt to strike Yuji yet again, Yuji would already be throwing another punch straight towards the curse's face. It would connect, and yet again, another black flash would go off. As Yuji would land the attack, half of the curse's head would be blown off. As the curse would drop to the floor, the innate domain that the curse had created would disappear as well. Yuji would also fall to his knees. Yuji would be exhausted and beaten, but this was only proof that he had gotten even stronger. As Yuji would stare at the curse, he would realize that it wasn't disappearing. Sukuna would then tell Yuji that the curse probably has its fingers inside of him, and that he probably needs to dig into it in order for him to get it. Yuji would say he doesn't feel like doing all that and simply use cleave on the curse's body. As Yuji would tear open the curse, he would see one of Sukuna's fingers and 3 other special grade cursed objects inside. Sukuna would laugh and talk to himself, saying that that's probably why the curse was as strong as it was. 4 special grade cursed objects combined in order to make this cursed monstrosity. He would snicker and tell himself that Kenjaku was a freak. However, Yuji would stare at all 4 of the objects. Sukuna would ask him what is he waiting for, but Yuji would just say, it's gross. Yuji would then grab all 4 of the cursed objects, wondering what the 3 cursed objects were. He would eat Sukuna's finger first, seeing as he had already eaten those and nothing had happened to him. But he would wonder what would happen to his body if he had eaten these. The 3 special grade objects had looked like embryos, and he wasn't sure if he was okay with eating something like this. But Sukuna would then remind Yuji of what he said, asking Yuji if he remembers him saying that he would do anything and eat anything in order to get stronger. Yuji would reluctantly agree, making sure to eat all 3 and scarf them down. He would begin to gag because of how gross they were, but then again, he didn't care at the same time. As long as it made him stronger, he was willing to do whatever. The second Yuji would eat the objects, Sukuna would note something would happen inside of Yuji's body. It was another change, causing Yuji to become more curse-like instead of human. Sukuna would laugh and begin to call Yuji creepy. Yuji would be wondering what Sukuna was talking about, but Sukuna would shake his head and say it was nothing. Kenjaku in the background would do nothing but laugh and smile. He had watched the entire fight go down. He couldn't have been more happier that Yuji was able to defeat this cursed spirit. Plus, on top of that, he was able to eat another one of Sukuna's fingers. Yuji would now be at 8 fingers, and he would be able to forward his plan. Kenjaku would begin to plot with the other cursed spirits, telling them that they need to lure Yuji in, as well as be able to capture Satoru Gojo. If they were able to get Yuji in, they would be able to capture him and force feed him more of Sukuna's fingers. However, with this time, with the fingers that they had stolen from Jujutsu High and some others that Kenjaku had found, Sukuna would be able to take over control, even if momentarily. And when that happens, they'll be able to create a binding vow with Sukuna or a deal and just hope that Sukuna would go along with their plans. However, in order for him to do that, Kenjaku would have to create more sickly curses. Kenjaku had planned to create more curses like the ones Yuji just fought, combining all of the rest of the death paintings into one. Yuji would be able to fight that, eat them, get stronger, and when Yuji would be just on death's door, they would finish him off and force feed Sukuna the fingers. While they would be doing that, they would also use the prison realm to seal Satoru Gojo. After that, everything would go smoothly. Kenjaku would laugh and tell everyone that the new age of Jujutsu is coming. Meanwhile, Yuji would just be resting, as he knew he had bigger things coming in the future. His only goal was to get stronger. Every time he believes he's gotten stronger, there will be something that sends him a reality check. So he would do nothing but train and get stronger, strong enough to where he could never lose again. He didn't know when the Jujutsu sorcerers would be coming after him, or if Kenjaku would ever send anything after him. However, he had to be ready, and he was going to be ready. And I think that's where I'm going to end it off here. Thank you all for listening. Let me know if you liked it by leaving a like, or just letting me know in the comments. I appreciate all of you, and thank you for the support everyone has been giving me. But yeah, again, thank you for listening, and yeah, peace.